Hi there, I'm your host Clive Serkin, and welcome to the Unstuck podcast, where we're on a journey to help you get control of your work environment, get yourself unstuck, and perform to your full potential. Today's guests are my first repeat guests. It's a milestone. And I'll explain why in a moment, but I just wanted to start just with a big warm welcome back to the podcast to the founders of Everybody Eat. Trish Thomas and Nichole Wilson. Welcome again, back.
Thank you for having us back, Clive.
Clive, this is the most fun we've had in years. Can we come every month?
You have a damn boring life then. But anyway, we'll get into that later, maybe offline. But just to remind everybody, excuse the pun, Everybody Eat is one of the most exciting in my mind, and I've been around a lot of food startups, but it's the most exciting and likely the fastest growing food startup out of Chicago. And the premise, and I might butcher this so you can fix me afterwards, but the premise is fantastic food, no matter what your issue is and no matter what your need is, that happens to be allergen free or clean for people who have food sensitivities, which way back when we talked about it, I got really excited because the issue in my mind, and as I think as you guys feel strongly, is and I have it in my house, is the person who has a food issue tends to be eating something different. And the people who don't have the issue are eating something different because they think the food sucks. And so the notion of everyone can eat it together, hence the name, genius, made all kinds of sense. So that's my recollection of the proposition. How did I do?
I think you did pretty well, Clive. I think you did A-okay. It really is about bringing people together over a shared love of delicious food. So you have nailed it.
And by the way, I know I'm pimping the brand, but it's like I'm legit. Like the other day, I vacuumed up one of the green chili crackers.
Yes, the fiery chili lime. That's it.
Holy smoke! Anyway, which is a small issue, but I have control issues. It's your problem.
Well, I think that the weirdest thing about our entire business, right, is we spent 5 years trying to figure out how to bring everybody to the table, give everybody a seat at the table, share over delicious food. And the only thing we hear consistently from consumers is that they keep hiding our food so that they don't have to share it with their friends and family, which is a really weird thing. So it's either I ate the whole bag or don't tell anybody I'm hoarding this in the bottom of my closet. And we're not really quite, you're the marketing genius. We're not quite sure what to do with that.
Listen, it's not hard to be a genius when the food tastes great. We always, back in the day when I was in business, it was like, if the food ain't great, forget about it. There's no amount of marketing can make shit food sell. And that's right. That's the end of the day. And you both know that sort of thing. But anyway, before I get into the real reason why you're back, maybe a quick update, Trish. And I know there's a bunch of stuff we can't talk about because you're in the middle of a bunch of stuff, which we'll have to do a third podcast to update everyone. But I know lots of things have been happening since we last talked a few months back, if I recall, it was a few months back. And a few months in the startup world is like a lifetime. So exciting stuff.
Years and years.
I think we talked 16 years ago now, but maybe it was 16 weeks. So in general, what's great is to continue to hear consumer feedback. You know, you always talk about business metrics, but one of the things that we measure, and Dick, who's our co-founder, when you write real human at everybodyeating.com, you actually get Dick. He's the real human. You believe like he's not this AI guy. But the number of consumer letters just with like gratitude and love have continued to increase. Last week we went national on the shelves at all the Sprout stores in the country, and we continue to build our business at Whole Foods. And what we learned is just how hard that is. I mean, what we found is the best way to build our business is to let people taste it. So our team has been doing sampling events. I think, Nichole, you sampled in Dallas.
Sure did. I went home to my parents and threw the kids in their pool and hit up 5 Whole Foods while I was there.
and Dick spent a week in New York, and we have people doing it in California, in Ohio, and we're seeing it in the sales numbers. So we could see the more people that taste our food, the more the velocity numbers go up. So we feel very blessed by that. And like you said, we have some other big things going on that we can't talk about quite yet, but we still keep on keeping on. And our crisp breads are launching in all the Whole Food stores in the Midwest, like this week or next week. And maybe if Nichole, if you're really nice to Nichole, she'll give you a little sweet update about some stuff that's happening later on this fall.
I'm
Maybe,
intrigued.
maybe I hold it pretty close to the chest, so
Well,
we'll have to make it worth my while.
it's an incentive. I'll make it worth your while. So let's go to the reason why I asked you guys to come back and talk. After the recording the first time, and we were just shooting the shit and saying goodbye, Nichole, you said to me something to the effect of, you didn't ask us the most important thing about our business.
Mm-hmm.
It's something like that, if I recall. And I'm like, seriously? Now you tell me this at the end of the podcast?
That's right. I
In
got
any
to keep
event,
coming back.
yeah. And I'm going. So we started talking about it, and I was blown away
Uh-huh.
because my perception and my focus of Everybody Eats is Everybody Eat, the brand and the product and the people I know. And I never knew this about your organization. So it was like, I was blown away. I was inspired. I was pretty sure we needed a specific podcast to talk about it because
Sure.
it's not a one liner. It's a really meaty topic.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted to get this out there because I want to challenge more companies to do what you're doing.
Right.
So I'd like to talk about what you're doing, but then I'd also like to talk about what does it take for other companies to walk the talk? Because
Absolutely.
this is something in my mind that is, the more people who do it, the greater the impact because it's impacting one person at a time and then amplifying it there. So, Nichole, instead of
Yes.
talking in code, tell us the one thing that I didn't ask you about Everybody Eats and what you're doing, and we'll go from there.
Well, I say, Clive, that you asked us a whole lot. The one thing is the other side of our mission. So our mission is to give everybody a seat at the table, literally and figuratively. And it happens literally with our food, but figuratively with our people. And so the way that we consider um, bringing folks to the table is that we have put ourselves in a position to be able to hire team members who hail from the south and west sides of Chicago, and proudly hail, I would say. And so, what this means is that many have come from disinvested neighborhoods. They have families with generational trauma and years and generations of struggling just to survive from an economic standpoint. And so, we also have several who have been a part of the criminal justice system. And typically that means there's no job for you. Don't even bother to apply. But what we say at Everybody Eat is your past does not dictate your future with us. And we as a leadership team have said we are committed to leveraging our privilege in service of our team. And we call it privilege by proxy.
So talk a little more about what do you mean privilege by proxy?
Privilege by proxy. So that is the concept that we have with the team members that we have, and for many of the folks on the leadership team. And I'll speak about myself. I'll speak from the I perspective and talk about me. Is that I've got a foot in both worlds. And so just before coming to Everybody Eat full time, I was also running a $40 million portfolio at Chicago Beyond, which is an impact investor here in Chicago. And their main commitment is to champion youth equity on the south and west sides of Chicago by investing in nonprofits that serve them. So, in that capacity, you learn a lot about root causes of issues. You learn a lot about the proposed solutions, and you also get a front row seat to what works and what doesn't. I also am a child of privilege. I'm a child of privilege for many generations from an educational standpoint, from a generational wealth standpoint. So I have the, what I would say, wonderful vantage point of being able to see and appreciate both sides of the coin. And so not only have I benefited in many ways from my privilege, I also see the systems and processes that hold inequity in place and am starting to learn how to dismantle them from this side.
And so you say you're a child of privilege. Part of that is, in my mind, and by the way, I'm like a total novice of that. So excuse me, but you got to educate me. But it's like
Of
in my
course.
mind, as I think about this world and I'm a child of privilege too. I have this social capital that
Yes.
is born out of my networks that I don't even really think about.
Right.
So I'm able to pick up the phone or email or something, and doors open up.
Correct.
And the converse is, and the people that you have in your organization that you are opening a door for don't
Hmm.
have that.
That's
And
correct.
I don't think those of us who do tend not to think about it. This is kind of,
Right.
it is what it is.
Right.
And I was telling you guys earlier on, I spent a little time this week talking with a friend called Tuan Win, who is a convicted felon
Hmm.
who made it out and entered the corporate world and got a job. Then created a foundation, Chicago Peace, and now he's launched a company. And he was explaining to me how he's struggling, even though like in the scheme of things he's killing it, but
Hmm.
how he's personally struggling because he can't get a loan.
Right.
He can't get an SBA. There are
Sure.
all these barriers that lined up, and
Hmm.
so it's not, as I understand it, it's not just about giving these people a job, which is a huge deal, I would imagine,
Hmm. Hmm.
but it's more than that. And talk about like in very specific terms, because I remember you talking about some of the things you do with and for and behalf of your employees.
Yes, yes, I'd be happy to. You are exactly right, Clive. It takes more than just a job. First, the first thing that we realize is that there's an ecosystem of support that has to be in place for our team. And it all starts with psychological safety and trust. And so when you're thinking about a team like this, um, psychological safety and trust don't just happen. It's millions of tiny, tiny interactions over time that create that fabric of trust that you then can literally wear like a blanket over yourself, over your team. And so that comes from knowing someone's story at the very beginning and actually caring about what you hear in that story and being able to see yourself in that story and share your own story. It starts with vulnerability and communication. And that's how you start to build that foundation, because anything that you throw over the fence that isn't landing in that kind of foundation isn't it's not fertile ground. And so for us, that's where we started. And with our team, it was physical safety. So here, understanding that safety is an issue for folks who are traveling from the south and west side. We've got our safety cameras. We've got an alarm system. Those make folks say the fortress is safe. Psychological safety is when I come here, I know that there are people who care about who I am and how I'm doing and want to help me grow and succeed, which for many of our team members, it's the first time that that's happened. We have very high expectations of our team. We give them the tools to meet the goals, but it starts off with saying, I see your potential, I see your promise. I'm going to believe in you until you do the same. And that's the foundation. Um, I know you asked for specific examples, so I can give you a couple of those, but perfect. So for specific examples, one of the things that I noticed with my team is that every Tuesday or Wednesday before payday, they'd say, "Hey, Miss Nichole, I'm a little short. Can you help me out?" And I'm thinking, now I know what you make because I pay you. Let me think about like let's start to figure out what's happening. So we would sit down and start having conversations and would start building a budget for the very first time in the lives of many of these team members. And the thinking of what they were spending, what they were forecasting their spend versus actual spend was light years apart. So we would run the math and I'd say, okay, well, that's negative 375 for this 2 week paycheck. And they say, you know what, I feel that. I said, yeah, I know. That's why we're having this conversation. And so what it started to become is an understanding that instead of saying, okay, well, I'll buy you lunch, or I'll give you an advance, which we don't do, although we do buy lunch every other week. It is, let's get to the root cause. And then once we started getting to the root cause of it, let's address the root cause. We have a robust money management class here, and I do one-on-one budgeting sessions, and with folks who have raised credit scores as they're stabilizing with us, they're getting car loans. I'm hopping on the phone to make sure that there are no predatory lending practices because they think they're
But
talking to. There you go.
talk about, because I remember you mentioned that, and
Yes,
this is
yes.
not like a conceptual thing. This is a real thing.
It's a real
Um,
everyday nitty gritty.
right,
Yes.
and as luck would have it, you can you spend a few years at Merrill Lynch, so you kind of
Yes.
know the space. But
Yes.
but there was one example I think you were told where you were on the phone. These people are being charged exorbitant like interest rates. So it's
Yes.
like the system is just sort of designed to keep pushing them down, and
You
it's
got it right. You
disadvantaged
got it
not
right.
only. It's not just access. When they do get access, it's not even access, as I
That's right.
understand it. So
That's right.
just talk specifics, because there was one where you called like the
Yes.
bank or something.
Absolutely. So I often do employment verifications, and so that's everything from car leases to now I'm happy to say apartments, mortgages, etc. So one of our team members came to me and he asked for me to do the employment verification, and I said sure. I'm standing right here. I said go ahead and hand me your statement so I'll know who to call. And I looked down and Clive, it was 27% on a car loan. I literally like all of a sudden this look came over me and I was like, give me your phone. Give me your phone. He goes, I've never seen you look like this. I was like, give me your phone now. He was on the phone with the leasing company. And I got on the phone and I like just said, tell me about this. They started explaining it. And then I said, you think that you're on the phone with our hourly wage earner. In fact, you're on the phone with a Stanford MBA. These are predatory lending practices. Get your manager and then get your manager's manager and get them on this phone. And it was just a complete reversal of power. It's all about a power dynamic. And so after talking to the manager, who was happy to hand me off to the supervisor, then we were able to get that down 14 points. And so while it wasn't perfect, it was still very high. That's one of those examples of privilege by proxy.
Right.
I have the privilege to know I can get on a phone and navigate that situation to a better outcome. And so by just being in proximity with me, Anthony was able to get that benefit as well. And so that's a really specific example of you, myself, someone else picking up the phone who knows to pick up the phone and knows what to say and changing literally the life of a person in an instant.
It's extraordinary, and I mean, 14 points is a game changer.
Yes, absolutely.
Incredible game changer in terms of that base. So,
Mhm.
so this is like standard operating procedure, time with the employees.
Yes.
Um, and I want to go back to this thing, this notion of I hold you to a high standard. It's not I hold you to a low standard. It's I hold you to a
No.
high standard because I think your potential is infinite, right?
Yes.
And the other part of it is, and I don't remember where this, somewhere along in my career, someone said something to me, which is, and I've always held this and try to sort of model this both with my kids and the people I've worked with is we're going to start with you have 100% of my trust. Like you
Hmm.
don't have to earn my trust. I
Right.
remember working with
Right.
someone who was like, you got to earn your trust. And I'm like, didn't feel right. And then
Right.
I heard the opposite, which is you have 100% of my trust to
Mhm.
start with. You don't have to earn it. You can
Right.
lose it, but you have 100% of my trust and my commitment. And that feels like the environment you're creating for people who have never felt that. And that is that fair?
That's absolutely you walk in the door with 100% promise, 100% potential, and 100% investment in our investment in your growth. And I've told folks on our team, you can earn your way out. That's what it is. You earn your way out. But when you show up and come through those doors, we fling them open, open arms. We, like I said, very high standards and expectations that we have. But what we as a leadership team, Trish and Dick and Matt and I say, what we owe to you is the right culture, the tools, and the resources to be able to meet these very high objectives. And so if you've got the infrastructure to succeed, the rest is on you. And we've seen something in you that said, come through these doors. We want you to succeed because you're part of this team, you're part of this journey. When you do great, we all do great. And we have, I mean, we say one team, one dream. We say one band, one sound. And so there are no individual superstars that make it go. It really is a team effort. And our team is educated in our business. That's another thing that I think is really important. It is important for folks to understand individually and collectively how what they do impacts something greater that is the one big goal we're all galvanized against. And so as we talk to our team, everyone knows how what they're doing impact creates an impact. And so if you choose not to do it, you are choosing not to impact. And that's when you start having conversations of whether or not this is a place for you, because the person on your right and the person on your left, who are your teammates, are saying, we're headed toward this goal and this destination. Are you in or are you out?
But this is, and we'll talk about how formal the program is, but the reality is you both, both of you and Dick come from, large corporations and thing, and
Mhm.
you made a commitment to launch a company. Launching a company, no matter how much depth of experience you have, is a ton of work and a ton of
Yes.
like roll up your sleeves, hands on, not sit in an office corporate, it's real grind.
Yes.
And you building, so it's like there's not a lot of margin for error.
Mhm.
Why on earth would you take on this extra, and I'm going to say burden,
Sure. Sure.
or conversely, flip it another way? Even if you have good intentions, the reality of devoting time, because this takes an investment of time, even if it's not a formal like program,
Absolutely. Sure.
it takes a ton of time. How can you afford it? I mean,
Right.
the sort of cynic in me goes, how can you afford this time? You gotta stay alive. So like, yeah, this is all conceptually sweet and wonderful music in the background. You're great people, but at the end of the day, the business has to survive. How does this make sense?
So here is where it's that you have I have the benefit of being an investment banker and being an M&A and saying, okay, there's got to be, it's if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. I mean, one of the things that's really important to us, and Dick really helped shed the light on this, is that we want to be a purpose driven company, but we are not a nonprofit. So that's one thing we've got to make very clear. And I'll tell you the way it manifests. I'll tell you two ways in which it manifests. One is retention. As folks talk about the labor market right now and they can't find anyone, if you go down on our production floor right now, which is about 28 or 9 people, over 50% of the folks on that floor have been with us for over a year in this market. 3 or 4 have been with us for over a year and a half. And so as you start thinking about acquisition costs of people, training costs, institutional memory, we are rich beyond measure in that dimension. And secondly, it comes to a great example is a recent change management process. We had a great bakery consultant come onto our floor, do a walk around, suggest 2 or 3 changes, and said, ultimately, I've been doing this for decades. It depends on your team and whether or not they embrace it. Our team, once we explained this is how we're going to take down our direct labor number, how it's going to impact cost of goods manufactured. We've got a lot of folks on our team who are competitors, whether it's somebody who plays chess or somebody who plays sports. And we said, we've got a new target. Here's how we're going to go after it. And to have the team embrace the change, which was a really robust change with the level of ownership and accountability, once they understood that they mattered and that their impact was actually what was going to get us across the finish line, we went from a cost of goods manufacturer. I won't give you exact numbers, but I'll give you the delta. We took it down $1.01 per pouch. And
Big.
so that is incredible. Basically, 30% we cut completely out of our costs. And so when folks say, well, how do you afford it? My question is, how do you not?
Not afforded. So this is not
Because,
a this is
Can I,
not charity. Go ahead, Trish.
no,
Trish, jump on
I just
in.
want to jump in. Well, I like, I'm your number one fan. I like listening to, I get to listen to every day. But I think that, Dick ran an agency, right? And his agency was Trisect. And he always said your business rides up and down the elevator every day.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you are in the talent business, which a marketing agency is, your people are your business, right? And I watched him make choices over the years that were not good financial choices for us personally, but they were great choices for his team. And over again, he always invested in his people. And when prior to starting this, I remember meeting with a really senior economic development person for one of the major counties in Illinois, and they were prioritizing different industries. And I said, why isn't food on this list? And he said, oh, those are terrible jobs. Nobody wants them. And Nichole and I were working on this, and I thought, well, that's really weird, right? Like, why are they terrible jobs? I've never had a terrible job. Like, why are we going to create that? And I think that as you watch how we've evolved, is that the attitude that your talent goes up and down the elevator every day is no different in a food business than it was in an advertising business, because our team is our front line. Food tastes good because they care, but watching them understand that they're really not coming to work every day, that it's their company, is what is amazing. And I think that when Nichole said, it is all about mattering. When humans believe that their vote counts, things change. And when humans believe that their opinions and ideas will be heard, profit margins go up. When you look at this, it's what happened, right? I mean, it wasn't introducing machinery or automation while we made small changes. Is that prior to the next stage of automation where we're going, which will have quantum leap changes, it was just really seeing in the numbers that when humans matter, life changes. And you think about how that could transform the whole food industry, from people thinking it's a terrible place to work to it's an amazing place to work, right? The life doesn't work without food, so why shouldn't it be fun?
I've always felt that there's no terrible jobs. There's only terrible people and cultures.
There you go.
There's
There
a,
you go. And we were bound and determined not to be one. And one of the things that, as we were hearing that, Trish and I said, you know what, we're going to bring integrity back to food manufacturing. And so you come in our break room, there's a Keurig, there's fresh fruit, it's clean. And when folks get up, they wipe down their table with a Clorox wipe. I mean, that's the kind of pride and ownership that really comes with it. And it pays itself in dividends over and over again.
so if it's such smart business, which I believe it is, obviously, because I'm passionate, but why aren't more companies doing it? Like if you just look, let's stay in Chicago, and there are more. The more and more I'm getting into this, and more I'm sort of, my ears are now open, my eyes are open, like Tuan. There are more and more companies that I'm running into, but nowhere near enough. And if you look at Chicago and you look at the startup environment here, and frankly, I don't think this is a startup small business thing. Frankly, it should be, the big companies have more of the resource, but maybe
Sure.
arguably not the intimacy to create the safety, and that may be a challenge.
Mhm.
Why aren't more companies doing it? Like,
I
what's
think it's hard.
stopping people?
I think it's hard. I think it's hard, and I think you also have to have an appreciation for a double bottom line. I think there also is, I'll just throw it out there. There's also bias. There's a lot of people who say, you know what, I'd be scared to come to work. I'd be afraid to work next to that person. This person's existence is so different from mine. In the same way that municipalities and businesses have disinvested from the south and west sides, it's the same with humans. A system is designed to do exactly what a human makes it do. And
Uh,
so that is bias that's being operationalized into action and structure. And so it's the feelings got to happen first, and then you've got the system that's in place to hold inequity where it is, because that's what's comfortable for whoever holds the power at the time.
And let me, it's it's bigger than people even think, right? So if we would have been, if we were smarter, we're pretty smart, but if we were smarter, we would have positioned the business from the beginning so that we could have been a minority owned business as well as a woman owned business. 80% of our team are people of color. And it's something that's really important to us in trying to figure out how a business could evolve or meet those criteria. So we've been out learning about that, and I've been out talking to people about it. And I can't tell you how many times I heard, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Why would you guys care if you're a minority owned business or a woman owned business? The women owned business checks that card. And I've been unbelievably disgusted by those conversations because it matters, and it matters a lot.
Big time.
And I think that it matters to the team that they look up and they see Nichole, they see Kia, they see all the team leaders that look like them. They look like their mothers, they look like their sisters, they look like their brothers. And they see where they can go. They see that their daughters can be Nichole. And it matters. And it is really, I saw a t-shirt yesterday that said, mattering is the minimum. And I was like, where'd you get that t-shirt?
I bet you did.
But you're so right, and again, I'm going on about Twan because I just recorded the podcast with him, and we really got deep into it. And it's like, it's one thing, and it's a great thing. Don't get me wrong, to create these opportunities and to have someone care about them. And Twan was talking about, I do that in Chicago Peace, but he goes, Clive, the fact that I have Viet 5, the company,
Mhm.
for-profit company that I owned, is a proof point that the stuff that I'm telling them is not just a speech I'm making, it's real. I did it.
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
they can see, and once you see it and you see yourself there, the distance seems a little closer, a little less. And,
Absolutely.
and it's just like these small but massive sort of statements of promise, I
Yep.
think, are so crucial, and that's what I'm hearing you say, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Dream realized. And so with hard work and dedication, and the team sees the journey along the way, but sees that it can be done and that it's doable. And in their own ways, they're translating that into, well, what does that mean for me and my family? What does that mean for me and my community? Because our team members quickly become the most stable nodes in their networks. And so as they do that, what we are pouring into them, they are then pouring into family members and communities. And so economic development, it happens in big, broad ways, but it also happens one person, one family, one community at a time. And so one team member, I tell this all the time, and Trish is always like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm driving somebody to Bank of America," because what happens when my team members go to open a bank account, a lot of people turn them away. So many have the cards and they're technically not bankable. And so I start with my frustration with that was like, get in the car, we're going. I've been at Bank of America for 20 plus years. I set up an appointment. I sit down with the teller. I say, I'm here with this person. Open it up, look at my account. Oh, great. You're a blah, blah, blah member. And I take exactly the grace and excitement that you just had with me. I
Give
need
it
you
to
to
this
transfer
person.
it to the person next to me. And I sit there and we go through and we answer the questions, and they walk out with a bank account and an understanding of how to use it. And then also, we role play in the car the whole way home. Okay, now if it's your turn, what is it? And I'm not there, what do you say? What questions do you ask? Every time there's an interaction, just like after talking to the car lease folks, it was then, okay, role model it. And I've had two employees who have then taken a sibling and said, I took my sister to Bank of America. I took my mother and now she has an account. And it's not a commercial for Bank of America. That's just who I happen to bank with. But again, privileged by proxy. They look on there and they say, oh, your account was established 23 years ago and you've been around and you pay your bills. Privileged by proxy. I'm able to extend that to the person next to me in a very real way.
It's extraordinary. I mean, my deal is, I leave this conversation because we're at time, but I leave this conversation with a question in my head, and a question for you guys is, how do we get more companies, one company at a time, to make the commitment at the top? Because this is a commitment of the three of you, the founding team, that says this is what we're going to be about. It takes a commitment, it's clear.
Sure,
So
sure.
it's not about optics. It's not about writing a check, which for me is the easiest thing in the world to do. But
Right,
like, to do this is a commitment that you stick with it. It's like, how do we get another just one more company to do it?
right.
Um,
I think
I don't know what's your perspective, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I'll offer one up, and I think it's got to be part of your vision. And I think it is then how do you operationalize that vision into action? And I think it's as someone who is leading a company, I think it's understanding why it's important, understanding why it's not only the right thing to do. It from a business standpoint, it is absolutely the right thing to do. It will make you a stronger business. It will take your chief asset and make it that much more powerful. It will help to ultimately sustain your company. And for us, in many ways, it's a competitive advantage. So to really truly see the value of it from the human side, from the financial side, from the strategic side, and say, we've got to tie this into our vision. And then you got to measure it. You've got to measure. We do what we measure. And so if we start to measure it and track it, and you see how it's mapping to actually making your company stronger, you'll continue to do more and more of it. But I think it's dipping a toe into the water and not thinking about it as this big, overwhelming task. But how do you do it one step at a time, one person at a time, and be the change that you want to see if it's true you want to see it.
It's incredible. So,
And
sorry, go ahead, Trish.
I was just going to say, and I'll just tell you a story I heard last week that someone that's working really closely with workforce development here in Evanston was telling me of a story about how they're really trying to employ young men. And that a lot of times, the companies, they might hire some of these young men and they don't show up for work, or they show up late, and then they just say, well, we fired them. And I'm like, well, that's not the answer. So I think that if you were really committed to the workforce, you wouldn't be just creating a scenario and then letting people fail. You would build into the process the time to actually understand what was going on, right? Like why was somebody late for work? What do they need to succeed in the same way that we do it with children, right? And Nichole and I have young kids between us, and if I had to fire my middle schoolers every time they made a mistake, man, they'd be out of the house. They would have been out of the house like 2 years ago, right?
Right.
But I think that looking at your employees and really treating them as you would family members, that it doesn't mean you're going to forgive everything without consequences, but trying to get to the bottom of what's causing the challenges in the first place versus just taking them at top value and assuming someone is a bad worker or a bad employee or something else. Because people fundamentally aren't bad. We all just have different challenges that we're dealing with every day. And when you're working with the challenge workforce, what they deal with every day, we can't even imagine.
Yep.
That's right. Trish, you brought us full circle. It's knowing people's stories.
Yep.
Like it really comes back to knowing folks' stories.
And getting real about it. Listen, guys, so I was right. This was you were right. This was the most important thing, and I was right. This would take a whole podcast. I'm blown away by what you're doing. It's amazing. And
Thank you.
my sort of quest coming out of this is figuring out how to get more people doing this. So you might have to deal with me.
Absolutely.
Connecting
Let
you
us
to
know.
people. But my challenge to everyone listening is how do you as an owner, or how do you as someone who knows owners, get them to commit to this kind of an enterprise, a social enterprise that's sustainable versus like a one-off write a check and say some nice things. Is my perspective. Thanks so much for making time. I know we're going to be back together because I know there's some big news coming.
That's right.
But in the meantime, I appreciate you putting time into this.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Clive.
Appreciate it.
This podcast was brought to you by Screen Dragon. We break down barriers, make work flow, and unlock talent. Visit screendragon.com to see our software in action.